Hey, KU fans, welcome back to the KU Sports Hour here at KUsports.com. I'm Matt Tait, your host today, and I'm joined, as always, by my guys, Benton A. Smith and Shane F. Jackson.
Shane F. Jackson. Whoa. What if that was his Twitter handle? Now you have to change it.
Yeah.
Just go ahead.
Stop
what you're doing. Change your Twitter handle.
We're not going to do this again. Every time you bait me into talking about Twitter, it sends listeners away.
It's like the fourth podcast in a row I've been recommended to change my Twitter handle.
Well, we're here to talk some KU football, of course. The Jayhawks took a tough one on the chin, I think, or maybe other body parts.
Multiple blows were landed.
Yeah, 12-7 loss to Coastal Carolina last week, and we're going to talk plenty about that. We're going to get to plenty of reader questions.
So many.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones this week, and I'm looking forward to all of them. I don't know if we have answers, but we're going to try. I don't know if anybody has answers, and that's where I want to start. Really off the top here, I just wanted to pose a question to both of you.
Okay.
How dire is this situation? How much trouble is Kansas football in? And I'm not trying to be an alarmist or go to the extreme or stir anything. You know, I really wonder what people think. I would love to know what our readers, our listeners think. I know what I think, and I think it's somewhere in the middle, somewhere between a lot of trouble and, they're okay. But I'm curious where you both stand.
Yeah, I think this loss to Coastal Carolina was kind of a reminder to people about where this program was when Les Miles came in here.
Bingo.
Yeah. So I think it should be alarming if you were hoping for a lot of wins this season. Like I think it was kind of a nice signal that like, hey, this season is not going to go the way that anybody on the team hoped it would. I don't think a lot of people that are in the program. Les Miles definitely didn't ever say a number like, I think we can win X amount of games, that type of thing, which was one of the smarter things I think that he did.
Yeah, no coach would do that, right? I mean, maybe a few have done it, but
he also didn't back away from the idea that they could be very good this year. You know,
he expected them to be, at least if you listen to his words.
Yeah, I mean, talking about dominant football, playing a dominant style of football.
Yeah,
we have not seen that.
You just set yourself up, man, when you do that stuff, when you say those things, because, even at his press conference on Monday, I mean, he was still saying things like dominant football and I like my team. And, that just sets the fans up to say, well, how about we settle for mildly competent football? And we'll start there. And that's where the jokes come in because you've set them up. So, no fault of his. I mean, you can't point the finger at him and say, "What did you do?" I don't think it's crazy like that. I think the guy's calling it like he sees it. I think that's how you have to do it if you're him. I think that's nice for us because we'd rather him actually say what he thinks than just be throwing a bunch of BS out there, right? But it might be time for a little BS now. It might be, even if he thinks these guys are still going to be really good. I mean, the one that I can't get over is I think it was maybe his first preseason leading up to the week of the first game at that press conference. I think it was that, or it might have been the final one of preseason camp. Either way, he just matter-of-factly said, I like our team. I think we have a good football team, if not a great one. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
You don't have a great football team.
Right.
Everyone knows that, and he should too. And so I get it, man. He's excited to be back in the game. He's loving working with these kids again. And guess what? These kids are working their butts off. I mean, they put in so much work this offseason. They always do. And that's never the issue. And I think they probably worked harder than ever because they want to live up to that Les Miles name. They believe that things are going to be different. And that inspires you to work harder, right? But, man, you've got to tap the brakes before you start saying, I have a great football team. Or even, nearing that line. Maybe I do. I mean, that was too much. That's the one I can't get over because we all knew that was not true. They do not have a great football team. They may have a decent team that could get better. That would have been a fair bar to set. But calling it, if not a great one, too much for me. And I think other people heard that. We wrote that. We talked about that. Other people, fans, paid attention to that. The people are listening.
Yeah,
right?
when he says that and you haven't seen the team play because the practices are closed, I mean, all you can do is say is, here's what he said.
Well, guess what? It carries more weight. We haven't seen this team,
but yeah, this is a guy who obviously won a ton of games at LSU.
He does know what great football teams look like.
So yeah, he's coached great football teams before. So that's why when he says that type of thing, it does, like you said, carry some weight.
Yeah.
Especially for someone so savvy with the media. In that documentary Miles to Go, there's a scene where he's telling Smacker, this is what they're trying to get you to say, and this is what you need to say.
Good point.
And he's being very blunt. Hey, I know how to play the media. Don't say stuff like that if that's not what you mean about this team. So
clearly he was trying to get that message out. Otherwise, why would you be saying that?
Sure, that's the thing. I think he does believe it. And I think part of that, and I wrote this in a column I wrote, is more the victim of circumstance than being naive. I think he's just so happy to be back in charge of a football team and around the game again that he maybe got a little bit football drunk and was like, oh, this is great. These guys are working hard. I got a great team. You don't. And
football drunk might be the perfect explanation.
I liked it. If we were titling these podcasts, that would be the title of this one: Football Drunk. Because the reality is, great teams don't struggle to beat Indiana State and score 7 points and lose at home to Coastal Carolina. Good teams don't do that. Kansas is neither right now, and I think if it hadn't been built up, and I'm not saying he was, again, you're right, he wasn't predicting bowls, and he tried to keep it reasonable. He did try to say we have a long way to go. I mean, he tried to balance it out.
Right, but he also said, was it after they beat Indiana State? Maybe, I don't know if it was immediately after the game or maybe 2 days later, but something along the lines of, we're going to be playing meaningful games in November.
Yes, he did say that.
I believe that was right after the Indiana.
Yes,
right.
He did say
so, I mean, that kind of implies that, this could be interesting. By November, maybe we'll be close to getting that bowl eligibility.
They all mean something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he definitely is very good at saying very vague things.
Yeah,
and he does so intentionally, obviously, a lot of times. But I mean, that's a kind of statement that
people latch on to, right?
People will say, "Whoa, Les Miles thinks we could be playing meaningful games in November," and meaningful is so vague you could interpret it any way that you wanted to. So I mean, if they're 1-10 headed into the finale, and you ask him about meaningful games, he could say, "Well, this is going to be a very meaningful game for our future
because we need some momentum going into the offseason
for next year." Yeah,
remember how well that's worked out. I agree. I think it's just, I think he tried to be reasonable. I think he tried to keep it balanced. I think he just let the enthusiasm that he has for being back in the game go a little too far and get a little too excited. And you can't hate the guy for that. You can't fault him for that. Good for him for liking his players and for being excited. But I do think when people are paying attention, and people here, especially here, are so fragile and vulnerable and scarred, you can't just throw words out there. They have to understand exactly where this team's at. And obviously that's our job to cover it a little bit, but we're not the ones coaching. We're not the ones playing. We're not the ones evaluating. I mean, we're just watching what happens and trying to make sense of it. And it's hard to do right now. Shane, getting back to the original question, how bad is it right now? Because let me set that up. I don't think it would seem as bad if those other things that we just talked about hadn't been said. Mm-hmm. But I think when you heard those things and you've sort of thrown your hope rope onto those things, you next thing you know, now you're devastated. If it was just a cool, calm, and collected, our only goal is to improve every week. And if we do that, even if we lose every game, we'll call it productive because we just have to get better. If that was your bar, that's where you started, then okay. Maybe a 12-7 loss to Coastal Carolina wouldn't be catastrophic. It wouldn't be good. No, under any circumstances, you can't paint a scenario where that's a good loss. But at least it wouldn't have been, wait a minute, I thought we had a great football team maybe. What is this? And so I think it definitely heightened the vibe around that what the heck's going on. So that's why I ask. I mean, where do you think it is?
The only thing that really changes is just how you view this team this year. I mean, you can't determine 2 games in, hey, this Les Miles experiment is going to work or it's going to fail. But I think when we went around the season predictions before the season, there was a few of us who said 3. I think I said 2, and I don't necessarily know how much that changes. Now maybe
did you hear that humble brag?
Well, now you're maybe looking at 1 or 2, and it might be tough to get that second one. So I think that's the only thing that really changed is that your perception of this team immediately this year. I mean, because we're talking about if Carter Stanley doesn't, lead that miraculous comeback against Indiana State, this team's 0-2 right now.
Yeah, they're 4 minutes away from that.
And so that's the only thing that I think changes is this year's perception of the team. It might be more dire than we were led to believe entering this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I know we don't talk to everybody, but we're all three on Twitter and message boards and obviously our comments. And what percentage of KU fans do you think were really entertaining, like, hey, we might have a chance to go to a bowl? I mean, it's a decent number, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a chunk.
15%? 20%?
Yeah, I'd probably put it in that range.
One out of every 5 or so, yeah.
Maybe. And I think the people who are truly invested in the program and have been playing and have been paying close attention year after year after year, even though it's no fun to do that,
right?
I think they came into this year thinking, okay.
They know better, right?
Yeah, they know better. They watched this team play last year and know who's back and who this team lost from last year. And they watch enough football that they understand you can't just change a program like this overnight. So, but I think even with that, losing to a Coastal Carolina team that is like a lower echelon FBS team, only his second year playing at the FBS level, that's the part that's disheartening, because I think probably the more optimistic, like realistic KU football fans probably thought, oh, maybe we can get to 3 or 4 wins. Or maybe they thought 3 was a given or 4 was a given. But I mean, that's a way to look at it realistically. So I think that the diehards, I don't think they were going nuts and saying we could win 6 or 7 games or anything like that.
Yeah, the people who checked out, who wanted to check back in, were like, this is why I'm going to check in, because it's Les Miles and we might go to a bowl. Wrong. And I don't hate them. There's no reason to hate them. I mean, like, get excited. I've said that since day one, since week 1. Get excited. Go to the games. And guess what? People did go to the games. 32,000 for the first 2 home games after a tragic 2018 season. That's a pretty good crowd. Those are pretty good numbers. And we won't see that the next home game.
And before that game, I'm watching West Virginia and going, holy cow, this seems really bad. And I started talking myself into, hey, maybe KU's starting 3-1 to start the year. And can you imagine, I guess, the enthusiasm around this program? That doesn't necessarily mean they were going to win more games the rest of the season, but can you imagine the excitement around that program just after that 3-1 start, and then a few hours later, I mean, 1-1 obviously did not happen. So.
Yeah, I think I was talking with Tait about this a while back, but I thought like they could realistically start 3-1 and then lose every game the rest of the way. But just because I felt like those were the 3 most winnable games on the schedule, the first 2 weeks, and then West Virginia coming in here in kind of a rebuild with Neil Brown. Kind of inheriting a similar situation to what Les Miles inherited here. Yeah, I mean,
their schedule has always been favorably front-loaded, right? I mean, like Tech's early, West Virginia's early. Now it doesn't matter whether it's front-loaded. I mean, look, I think getting back to that original question, I don't think it's time to sound the alarms. I don't think it's, hey, everybody jumped off the highest cliff. I mean, I don't think anything like that's necessary. But it does depend on where your perspective is. It does depend on what you thought and expected going into this season. And you're right, Benton. If the people that have really been paying attention are seeing this, they're going, okay, this is par for the course. And what matters now is, do they get better from here? Do they bounce back? Do they look tougher? Do they look more complete? Do they look more disciplined? And the issues with this team, and we'll go over that here for a few minutes before we get into the questions, but the issues with this team are everywhere. It's play calling, it's quarterback, it's offensive line play, it's playmakers. They are having problems everywhere. And Les Miles this week sort of referred to that as a settling in process. No problem with that. I have no problem with that. I think that's fair and to be expected. Any coach in his second game at a new program is going to have some growing pains and some settling in. But the tough part here is for Les Miles, it's a settling in process and part of the journey. For the Kansas fan base, it's just more agony and misery. And they're both right. And unfortunately, neither one can do something to help the other. The fans, again, I'll be shocked if there's a good crowd against West Virginia. And how can you blame them?
Yeah.
How can you blame them? These people have seen this for 10 years now.
Well, maybe they got a godsend by it being on ESPN Plus.
Yeah, true.
Something that a lot of people don't like or don't want to watch a game on.
True. Yeah, true.
Or don't have, or fill in the blank.
Yeah. So I think that's fine. The fans they can't help less anymore. Like, they went. They showed up for 2 games. Man, if they don't come back, you can't blame them anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of those things you just mentioned about like how similar this looks. That's why a lot of fans are angry or disappointed.
Yeah,
or,
right.
Wherever they fall on that spectrum, it's that this is a completely new coaching staff, and was, obviously one that they had a high regard for entering this season. But a lot of the same things that have plagued this program for the past 4 years and beyond. I mean, you could, if you just randomly pulled out clips from this loss to Coastal Carolina and, other bad performances from the past 4 years,
it looked like the same season.
Distinguish what's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I think that, whether you thought they were going to win a bunch of games or not, I think the Les Miles effect led most people to believe that things are at least going to look different. And right now,
I thought so too.
I did too.
Honestly,
yeah, I agree. And right now they don't look that different. So,
and what makes it worse is KU fans get to look over and see K-State also with a new coach, and they're just rolling over teams who are similar competition to what KU is facing.
That's a good point. What makes it even worse is when you lose at home to a team called Coastal Carolina, and they've got a Jayhawk piñata that they beat the hell out of in your locker room after the game. You guys obviously saw that.
Yeah, that was making the rounds on Twitter.
That's big time.
Yeah,
that is that. So what I want to know is, did they have that made and bring it here, or did they pick one up somewhere in town, Party America or whatever? Or, that would make sense. There would be a Jayhawk piñata in Lawrence. If there's one, if there's going to be one anywhere, it would be here.
I thought maybe Manhattan.
Yeah, that makes a little more sense. You're right, because
that's investigative journalism. Really, you gotta go look for that.
Shane, you used to live in Manhattan.
There you go.
True.
Tap into your sources, man.
I got people who work at Party America down there.
You got a guy. Either way, wherever they got it, and it was hanging in that locker room, and it will be a forever video clip. I mean, that is just a beautiful thing, and good for them, man. I mean, I know KU fans don't want to see anybody else having fun at their expense, but hey, those dudes had fun, and they won the game. I mean, they flat out won the game. I know you can make some arguments that Kansas beat itself and all that, but no. I mean, Coastal Carolina made plays when they had to. Kansas didn't, and that's as simple as that. Let's jump over real quick just a couple of things. We talked about the issues plaguing this team, and then we'll get into the questions from our loyal Twitter followers and readers. But quarterback, we got to start there. I mean, that's
where a lot of questions came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So should we hold off?
No, we could.
Yeah. I mean, real quick, we'll just sum it up, right? Carter Stanley in week 1, decent, pretty good. Made a drive when he had to make a drive.
But still turned the ball over.
Still was not, a clear cut, wow, that's our quarterback. But he won the game, and he didn't make awful mistakes. Fast forward to week 2, where you're expecting improvement. No more first game jitters, another week under his belt, confidence. He did make mistakes. He made bad mistakes, bad decisions, forced the ball. What I keep just sort of finding my mind blown by is Carter Stanley, from the minute he signed with this program, was a guy who was mobile. And one of the things he does well is run and create opportunities and plays and things like that with his feet. And in this game, at least once, but more than that, but once on an interception that he threw.
The one for Parchment?
Yeah. I mean, his first one. He had an opportunity to tuck it and run and go get 8-10 yards, maybe more. And he still forced it down the field when it wasn't there. That's weird to me, because this is a guy who, from day one, and going back to his high school days, was more comfortable as a runner. I mean, he didn't have to be a thrower. He could throw it, but he was a guy that made plays, tuck the ball and go. And in this last 4 or 5 years now, we've seen him develop as a passer, but obviously not, to an incredible length, because he hasn't really been the starter. And now you're seeing him almost develop as a passer to the point where he's thinking pass first when he should have just instinctively been a runner. And so that stinks. I mean, for him, for the team, those are plays that in the past 2 or 3 years, he would have never thought about doing that. He would have just tucked it and ran and got what he could. That's how he was a part of that Texas upset. That's how he made plays when he did get in the game in recent years. And so for that to be gone is again baffling. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I asked him specifically about that, just like, because I mean, Coach Miles and Carter Stanley had referenced that play and how he should have run it instead of forcing that deep throw down the sideline, and he couldn't even really put his finger on it. But it's clearly something that has been addressed, and I think now it's going to be at the forefront of his mind moving forward. Like, okay, I have to run the ball in these situations. I'm capable of making a play. He's not like Peyton Bender last year, where the guy wasn't mobile. I mean, Carter Stanley, like you said, is known to have a little bit of speed for that position, and he's shown in the past he's comfortable doing it. So I think from this point going on, we're going to see him maybe be more willing to just tuck the ball and go make a play with his feet.
Here's the question: is it going to go too far the other way? Is he going to run now when he should throw? I mean, that's the part. That's sort of the Kansas football curse. Like, you got a kid who can run. He should have ran. He didn't, and now he's going to correct it by overcorrecting it. I'm not saying he will, but like, you have to wonder, because that's what happens when you're still trying to find a guy to consistently play quarterback at the level it needs to be played. And for his sake, hopefully he figures it out. He may not, and that's what I'm going to be watching for on Friday as much as anything. Are there times where he should throw the ball and maybe hang in there and let a play develop a little longer before he takes off? Or does he just take off now because that's so fresh in his mind?
Well, he might have to take off a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
How much the level of competition is going up so much. Like, I mean, he might not have a lot of time consistently. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles it, because I feel like there's just a whole other nightmare coming his way on Friday night compared to what he's seen so far.
Yeah, there was one play I remember specifically against Coastal Carolina when they have a screen for Puka to his right, and he drops back and doesn't see it, and so he runs to his left, and he ends up reaching over the first down marker. And I think that's what he's got to do. If his first read, maybe even a second read aren't there, he's got to run instantly. Like, that's got to be his decision. Just tuck it and run. More or less. And I think he tried to do that late in the game just because Puka was his only option on fourth down, and obviously it didn't work out. But, going back to the earlier occasion, I think that's what he's got to do. If his first or second read's not there, he can tuck it and run. And, he even mentioned yesterday, I believe, that, he's had RPO experience in the past, and he would like to run some of that going forward, and that would seem to suit his skill set by just running. I mean, I would like to see that going forward.
That brings us to issue number 2. What is this offense? I mean, I've been underwhelmed by the play calling. I've been underwhelmed by their ability to get guys involved. I mean, you've got Dalen Charlotte, who finally has a breakout game in week 1. Looks good doing it. Catches the game-winning touchdown. Completely disappears in week 2. Part of that's on the player. Part of that's on the defense, and then part of that is on the offensive coordinator and the calls that are made. I mean, look, Andrew Parchment and Dalen Charlotte absolutely should have had the ball more in week 2. Whatever you got to do to get it to him. I mean, again, a couple of times Carter Stanley's forcing it to him when he shouldn't, and then it gets picked off. So I realize you don't want to necessarily, be on that tunnel vision thing where you're just forcing it to him and it's a detriment, but be creative. Find ways to get these guys the ball. I asked Les this week about his offense. Are you surprised it's been so stagnant? Through 2 weeks, they've scored 31 points, and that's barely, right? I mean, they scored 7 on their opening drive of week 2, and they scored 7 on their last drive of week 1.
And, I mean, some of those points go to Hassan defense.
Yeah.
That's a real good point. So 24 offensive points. Yeah, with missed kicks and...
So they scored 3 offensive touchdowns, right?
Yeah, Sosinski.
Yeah. Charlotte and then
Herbert. Right.
Yeah.
Crazy. So, yeah, I mean, the answer that Les gave was we have weapons. I think we'll see that emerge. It's great to have weapons, and I think they do. But you got to find ways to use them. And I think the offense has been very vanilla. I know you don't want to. I know you don't want to show everything in week 1, week 2. But I don't care. If you're Kansas, you should throw the kitchen sink at it. You have to win those games. And then if you've put it on film and other people can can now scout that and study that. Well, okay, then you adjust. It's, I mean, I'm not a head coach. I'm not even an assistant coach, guys. but
Are you an analyst?
You're our head coach.
there you go.
That's right.
I'm going to tear up.
Well, now you're currently wearing a headset and a hat.
Yep.
So you look like a coach. I'm
going
to be honest.
That feels really good. We might need to get a Twitter photo of that. That's going to be good. But yeah, but I think I want to see more from the play calling. I thought Puka had a great game on Saturday. And he probably forced about 27 missed tackles, but they were all in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage, and he gained 2 yards after making 3 guys miss. I mean, they've got to do more. They got to do more with him in space. I thought Khalil Herbert should have had more carries. He had 8 touches. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's enough. I mean, I just, and I know if your line's not getting it done, that's a whole other issue. It does limit what you can do, but man, you've got to do anything you can think of in your bag of tricks, and I don't care what your plan going in was. When you find yourself only having scored 7 points against Coastal Carolina, you've got to do more. You've got to find out, and that's what I'm most excited to see this week, honestly. Like, maybe excited was the wrong word. Most interested in watching is does the offense look like it spent the week trying to adjust, trying to put more in or do something or tweak this or that, because if they just roll that same stuff out there, they're going to lose by 40 points.
Yeah. Well, I asked Carter Stanley the other day, just like how much of the offense has kind of been withheld, like how much of the playbook have we actually seen so far? How much more is there that you guys haven't even shown? And he basically said, I'm not sure that Les Miles wants me to answer those types of questions. And I think like that didn't come as a surprise to me, because the players have been pretty guarded with some of their responses. And I think that's just coming from the top down.
Right.
But there's clearly more in the playbook. There's clearly more things they can do. Yeah, I mean, Shane mentioned RPO. In the spring, I talked to both McVitie and Stanley about how much they were practicing RPO, and that was definitely a part of the things that they were working on throughout the spring. So maybe they're saving that. Maybe they have been saving that. If they have been, and it works, you're going to look pretty bad for not having used it in a loss to Coastal Carolina.
Right.
But I don't know. I agree with you. So far, the offense looks pretty vanilla, and there's not a lot to it.
And part of that is they just can't sustain any sort of drives.
Right.
And so you're looking at where the first game you ran really 60 plays because the last 4 don't count. And then the second game you're on 56 plays. And so it's tough to go, hey, KU has all these different weapons. Let's give these guys a bunch of carries and catches when you only have 50 some plays.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
I mean, eight carries for Khalil in a game where they only run 60 is not terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how quickly that becomes something that's addressed, or how quickly it continues to be an issue, a bigger issue, week after week after week. I think that's going to be. I don't know. I mean, what I liked about Les on Monday was his sort of digging in his heels approach. Look, I'm not going to make a bunch of changes. I'm not changing the quarterback. I asked him about just tweaking the offense and things like that. I'm not. It's too early to change. It's too early to change, and I think there's something to admire about that. I do. I think we've seen over the last decade coaches that are willing. I mean, look, if David Beatty were the coach of this team, there's no way Carter Stanley would have played all 8 quarters so far. There's no
there
way.
Been 3 quarterbacks up.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think so. Yeah. And so we've seen what that does. Now, we also know that Carter Stanley's probably, not going to start at a lot of schools, but he is starting here, and they're sticking with him. And I thought that was a good thing in week 1. I thought it was a good thing in week 2. I like that he's going into this week with it. You've got to give a guy a chance. Just like they say you got to give the head coach a chance, right? Well, you got to give all your players a chance too. And he seems to be doing that. So tip your cap to him for that, Les, that is, because I think as much as that may not be doing anything now to produce victories or whatever, I do think it's at least creating a culture of consistency. And I think that's going to go a long ways toward maybe changing the overall culture here. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to take. I get why fans are frustrated already. It's hard to take. Nobody wants to be patient, and if you are going to be forced to be patient, you at least want to see something that you enjoy watching. And right now, not a whole lot of that. Let me ask you another question. Now, Week 1, as we talked about a few minutes ago, they're 4 minutes away from losing that game to Indiana State. They win it. Good comeback. Nice final drive. Feel-good story. Les Miles wins his first game at Kansas. Rah-rah, right? Do you think that backfired? Do you think that was a bad thing? I mean, obviously losing is not good, but do you think they felt a little too good about that win, even though it wasn't really a good win?
I don't think so. I mean, I didn't get the sense from the guys that I talked to that they were like extremely excited about the way that they played or anything like that. I mean, they knew they didn't play well.
Yeah.
They didn't want to beat an FCS team because of a late fourth quarter drive.
Sure.
You know, they wanted to come out and win convincingly and then look good doing it. And they knew that didn't happen. So I don't know. I didn't get the sense that they were feeling like overly
Too
confident
good,
because they beat Indiana State or anything like that.
No, in a lot of ways, it was the perfect situation for them because they won that game, and then it was kind of a lesson. Like, hey, we didn't play that well, and this is the things that we can do to make play better. Obviously, they didn't do that in week 2, but they at least knew that immediately right after, and a lot of players kind of echoed that sentiment right after the game.
Yeah, good point. All right, 30 minutes in, let's go. The final 30, or at least 25. Well, we might talk a little Boston College at the end.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll see how many questions we can get to. We're definitely not going to be able to get to all of them because I think there were more than 50 this week.
Wow.
So shout out.
Yeah,
Shout out to
keep them
to
coming.
The readers, to the followers on Twitter, and we want to dive into what's on your mind. So we'll open this up with some quarterback questions. First one is from Paul White. How could McVitie go from co-starter on the depth chart last week to 0 snaps through 2 games while Stanley has been this bad? What does that say about Miles or McVitie? So
I wanted
to open this up by saying, like, I'm pretty convinced at this point that they just thought Carter Stanley was clearly better than Thomas McVitie, but didn't want teams that they were playing in the first few weeks to be able to prepare for Carter Stanley. So they're like, yeah, it's a close competition. Could be McVitie, could be Stanley. If it really was that close and they really did like McVitie, maybe he has already played at some point, but they've stuck with one quarterback. So I think that Stanley won the job in their eyes, and they don't want to just abandon him because of that.
Yeah, what have you heard about McVitie? I've heard a few things, but I'm wondering what you've heard. I mean, because the easy answer out there in fan world is, well, let's at least look at him.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we just talked about sticking with Stanley, and I think that's the plan. I think that's a good thing because I think if the offense is called correctly, there are things Carter Stanley can do to run an efficient offense. I think they can do enough. But I don't think it's called correctly right now, or at least correctly in the sense that it fits his style and what he's best at doing. And part of that's on him, but yeah, I think that can all work in harmony and better than it is. But what have you heard about McVitie?
Well, I mean, players never are going to like talk poorly about a teammate,
right?
But I would say, and I think Shane would probably back me up on this, when we were watching a lot more practice in the spring, and then we watched a little bit in August, McVitie is not an accurate guy. There's a reason that he was playing special teams at Pitt before he transferred to play JUCO for a year. Like it's just not one of his strengths, throwing an accurate ball. I think he's a little erratic. I think sometimes he looks really good probably, and sometimes his passes are off the mark. So I think that's ultimately what kept him from getting on the field.
Yeah, and we've said this before. At least what I believe is probably one of his best skill sets is running the ball, and they haven't done that a lot with the quarterbacks that we were talking about earlier, and we didn't get to see a lot of that in practice. So it's tough to say, when Les Miles was talking about in the spring, if it was enough, like, hey, it's going to be his job no matter what. I will say that I think and we kind of agreed about this, a couple days ago. It'd be tough to start McVitie in his first game on the road against Boston College on a short week. Yeah. So if there was going to be a quarterback change, I couldn't imagine this week. It happened this week. Yeah. Next week would be probably the week I would imagine it happens.
Yeah.
That's a good call. Yeah.
Next question, PDX Jayhawk said 16 of the last 19 plays were runs, often into stacked boxes. If Miles won't let Stanley throw, shouldn't he play a quarterback? He will.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And Mr. PDX, hope you found our podcast on the various podcasting platforms. We're putting it out there. So hopefully you're listening to this and you're listening to it from Spotify or Stitcher or Intune or iTunes or even right on our site, which we love.
And SoundCloud.
SoundCloud. There you go. So yeah, hopefully you found it. But thanks for sticking after us. We're developing this thing. We're sort of like KU football right now. We're developing this thing. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't think it's a matter of whether he'll let Stanley throw. Do you?
Yeah, it seemed like it was late in the game. It seemed like they were clearly not interested in having him throw the ball or like having him check out of plays.
Yeah.
They were determined that they were going to run on a lot of those last plays, and I'm assuming that was the result of him having those 2 interceptions.
Yeah, true. I mean, overall, both games included. Now, I mean, I feel like if he hadn't thrown 2 picks and they weren't worried about where his head's at and trying to get it all back and things like that, I think he threw the ball fine in week 1. It wasn't great. He missed a lot of passes, but again, we talked about that. His receivers bailed him out, but he at least put it in the air and gave him a chance. I mean, he threw it 29 times, right? What did he throw it this week? 19? Yeah, 13 and 19. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it just magically gets better because you put a different guy in there. Right. I think that's the bottom line. We've seen that over the years, over and over and over, and I don't think it magically gets better. There's a chance. I mean, Jake Heaps was the better answer after the Dane Christ experiment. And guess what? Jake Heaps couldn't hold up because the line couldn't hold up. And Jake Heaps can throw the football. He played preseason games with the Seahawks. I mean, this is a guy who got a chance in the NFL. He can throw it, but when you drop back and in your final step, people are in your lap taking you down, that doesn't do much. So I think it's too easy to look at it and just say, well, put a quarterback out there who he'll let throw. I think he would let anyone throw if he would have time to do it. This is where the issue comes with the O-line. I don't think it's played up to par yet. I just think that they have enough experience up there. They have enough size up there. I thought it was an awful, awful sign that they got whipped by the undersized Coastal Carolina team. I just think that these guys are big bodies. They're legit size. They should be able to do more. And that sounds easy, I know. But I think part of it's confidence, part of it comes from experience, and part of it just comes from all the turnover. They've just had so much turnover at the position, in their coaching rooms, all that these guys, as much as they've grown their bodies, they haven't really had time to develop.
Next question. More of a joke than an actual question, but I definitely wanted to.
We like
sure.
jokes.
Yeah.
We like jokes.
Tanner Crawford asked, "What is cursing the quarterback position? The Chiefs' curse was Lynn Dawson broadcasting games. He retires, and then Mahomes becomes MVP. Wow. Do we need to sacrifice Todd Reesing or Bill Whittemore?" So he's willing to do anything. Look out, Todd.
Yeah, seriously. I wouldn't sacrifice Todd Reesing. That wouldn't be real popular. Anywhere, but man, I'll tell you what, Todd Reesing's tried. He comes back and he does the fist pump at donor things. He's out on the field doing it. That guy's tried to keep up his end of the bargain, even though he hasn't played in 100 years now. I think what part of what's cursing the quarterback position is again starting over every 2 years with a new head coach.
Sure,
And what do you do when you start over with a new coach? You also start over with a new coordinator. They've also had a ton of coordinators, way more offensive coordinators than head coaches, and in the last 10 years. So that's a problem. Not only is that a problem in the games and with play calling and things like that, but it's also a problem with recruiting because you just never know what you are, who you have, and then you have guys that can go start at Virginia Tech and they leave. So. God, yeah, I don't know the answer. I mean, there is something. I think it's legit. I think there's something cursing this whole program. And people always talk about that Lou Perkins sold KU football's soul to get him into the Orange Bowl. Maybe that's true. I mean, we're at the point where we have to really look at that and say maybe that's true. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a fan alive that probably would trade that. Maybe it's probably getting close now. But
it's also like that was kind of a reminder to me that. When you're KU football, a program that has historically struggled, you just are not going to typically have a Todd Reesing fall into your lap. Like that, that guy's like a once in every 50 years type of quarterback.
Yeah,
as far as this program goes.
For sure. And you know what he benefited from too? really good offensive coordinator and offensive line.
Okay. Yeah,
you know, I mean, that's exactly right.
Everything.
Yeah, and receivers. I mean, like Todd Reesing was great, man, and an absolute legend, and he deserves all the love he gets. But he had a lot more help, man. He had a coaching staff that was here a long time. He had a group of linemen and receivers that were here a long time, and they all got to develop together and work together, and I think that's so important. And that's what's sort of weird, you know. I mean, Kale Pick was the immediate backup to him, and then Kale Pick got a chance for a half a minute, you know, after Reesing graduated. But I'm surprised with things rolling at that level, bowl games after bowl games, and this magical season of 2007. I mean, with things rolling at that level, I'm really surprised KU didn't have a better quarterback in the fold waiting, because that's what hurts. You know, you lose guys because of coaching turnover, and they've not been able to do that. So maybe this is the change. Maybe Les Miles, with all that New Orleans and Louisiana voodoo that he has in his back pocket, maybe he will be the guy that exercises that and will land a big-time quarterback. Who cares if he's a 2-star, 3-star, 4-star? Who cares? But maybe he'll find the guy, and maybe that's what it took to bring in Mr. Voodoo, Mr. Mad Hatter. I don't know. We'll see. That's among the most interesting things moving forward, though, and that could be part of the reason that you've got Carter Stanley out there right now. If you've got somebody who you think could come in next year, you got to get him still. But if you do, it'd be much easier to give him the job if you're replacing an outgoing senior than if you're replacing a guy like McVitie, who would be back, right? So,
right.
So yeah, long way to go before any of that pans out or works out. But I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. A couple quick questions regarding like kind of a extreme quarterback change this year. More about this season than long term. D. Brett Dickens asked, Wildcat with Puka in the gang, and then Jason B. Shore asked, Belton Gardner at quarterback. So those are very similar type of questions. So I thought we could just kind of maybe think about that. I mean, will this get to a point in the season where Les Miles and Les Kenning are like, you know what, this isn't working. Let's just put an athlete back there and let's have him go make plays, whether that's Puka Williams or Khalil Herbert or Belton Gardner. And you obviously could rotate those guys and just completely overhaul the offense. So I don't think that they would do that. I don't think that they would take that route, but I just thought that it was kind of an indicator of where fans' heads are at, that this is even being brought up.
Yeah, obviously it won't get to that point, but watching Army a couple hours before that game and just seeing them run the ball 60 times or whatever in that triple option, it was kind of fun to imagine for a second what KU would look like if they tried to do that. I mean, they're already running kind of an older style type of offense where they're committed to the ground. So what if they tried to mix things up and did a little triple option? And as a person who would cover the football game, that'd be a lot of fun. That game could potentially be like 2.5 hours.
No kidding. Yeah.
No, it's fun to think about. I obviously don't think it will ever get to that extreme.
Yeah, it's hard to do that on the fly, right?
Yeah, that's another part.
I don't. Neither of the Lesses strike me as guys who are willing to kind of do that. Charlie did it. Charlie did it every week. He was willing to rewrite the offensive scheme and game plan every week because he was desperate to find something that would work. And he's good with X's and O's too, and he was able to do it. It's just so hard to teach that in a week, to change your system, to change what you're going to do. So it would have to be pretty desperate because at this point, I would think that they would, okay, if Carter has 2 or 3 more bad games and they got to go somewhere else, well, they're going to probably give somebody else a chance, somebody who's a quarterback. It might be Manny Miles. It certainly could be McVitie. It could be Miles Kendrick. It could be Torrey Laughlin. I mean,
yeah,
there are options, right? Yeah, and so I'm also going to tell you flat out that if it continues to be a problem, I will write a column that says they should do the Wildcat and just call it the Wildcat. You don't have to call it the Jayhawk. I don't like that, but the idea is figure out something that works. And if your quarterback making throws down the field isn't going to work, then snap it to somebody who can make something happen with it. And I agree, it's hard to see that happening, but I don't know. I just think if they're committed to what it seems like they're committed to, which is consistency, really building a foundation for this culture and what they want this program to be, then I don't think that'll happen.
Yeah.
But I like it. Good questions. I mean, those are fun to
definitely.
think about.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
Question from John Pinka. Why do we use the I formation so much? Run from the spread, fewer guys in the box. So I think this is one of the things that really kind of enraged the diehard fans. Like, why are we setting ourselves up to, have Puka Williams have to break 5 tackles when he gets a handoff? Why are we running out of this formation that puts the defense in position to make plays so easily? Obviously, Les Miles and Les Kenning have been coaches for a really long time and know football way better than any of us do. But when you see stuff that seems so easy to fix, I think that's where some of that rage comes from. So, Shane, what's kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very puzzling why they continue to run so much 12 personnel, and especially with the backs, the skill sets of the backs. Puka's a guy who's going to be able to create in space. You would think you would want to spread defenses out a little bit more, and let's see him get on the edge, and especially when defenses are just stacking the boxes. I mean, they got so many edge rushers coming in. They'll send corner blitzes. It does seem kind of confusing why they're going to jumble everything up in the middle, and you proceed not to take shots down the field. You're just asking for this to happen, and Puka has to break 275 tackles for a 4-yard gain. So I think it does all stem to the fact that Chimp Lindsey was going to be the original OC, and then he left. And I think this offense looks a lot different if he's still here. And I think they're kind of making this offense up on the fly, and this is kind of their 1-year type of offense look, and maybe it switches up next year.
Yeah, that's a great point. Look, there's some logic too. You have a really good running back or a couple of them. Let's put a fullback out there and give them more lanes to run through. That is logical. But you're right. In college football and in the Big 12, and when you look at film of what Puka did when he was successful, you don't need that. Spreading it out is the same as giving him lanes.
You need him in space more than anything.
Right. So I get the logic behind it. Let's just put a big tough kid in there and have him follow him. But that makes it too easy on the defense too. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think Les has liked the fullback throughout his career, and that's a part of it. There's no doubt about it. But I think it's time to abandon that. I think that's probably a first place to start. If this continues to be a problem and you're only scoring 7 points against Coastal Carolina, you need to do something different, and that would be the easiest first place to start because you do have more receivers you can put on the field, and you do have formations available that you can spread things out with. And I mean, part of that, you could put Puka out, and just find ways to get him the ball there. So if they're still running with the fullback, if they're 1-7, 1-8, and they're still running with the fullback in week 9, week 10, that's bad. That's really bad. But give them some time. I think that's part of it. And, I think I don't think any of us would be shocked if at some point we see Ben Miles lined up at fullback and Manny Miles lined up at quarterback. I mean, that's incredible to think, but right. But it could come. It could come. And what a cool moment for the family if it does. And if it's successful, even better. But it would be crazy to see people react to that. And again, if it works, that's all you're trying to do. You're trying to find stuff that works. So kick all the tires, see what you got to do. But I think getting rid of the fullback first would probably be the easier way to go, because all you got to do is watch film of Puka last year and see what he did. And he did it without a fullback.
Yeah. Next question. I just liked some of the terms that Ted Adams used, so that's why we're skipping over some to get to him. My eyes weren't lying to me, were they? The OL and defensive front seven sucked pond water yesterday, he said.
Teddy.
Yeah. How much better?
Sucked pond water.
Yeah, I just like that. I'd never heard that before. How much better did those units have to be to win another game this year? I'm not seeing much chance. So much for quote unquote breaking the cycle this year.
They got to get a lot better.
Yeah, the old line has not been nearly as good as Les Miles talked them up to be heading into the season, and the D line. Every once in a while you'll see something positive, but it's an inexperienced group, as we knew it was going to be, and they've faced the two weakest teams that they're going to face all year. So I agree completely. This is troubling if you're a KU fan to play up front on both sides of the ball. Really.
Yeah, Darius Meringue's been good, real good, and he's flashed as a guy who belongs and can play. Kamara's looking good. I don't know what people call him, man. Is he a linebacker?
Yeah, I guess he's officially a linebacker, but he's obviously, when you watch him play, a defensive end.
Thank you, because that's what I want him to be. That's what he is. That's how he plays, and his size is there too. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. But he's been good. And they've had some other guys make some plays. Jelani Brown, a couple other guys on the inside. So yeah, that's been a part of it. I would probably grade the D-line better than the O-line so far. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I'm not giving high marks to either. But I think the D-line's been better. I mean, look, they gave up 12 points. I don't think that they probably should have given up 0, but they gave up 12 points. They could have given up 20 if Coastal Carolina had a guy who could make a kick.
Right.
But they could have given up. 12 points if you hold a team to 12 points, you should win. If you hold a team to 17 points, you should win. And they did that in the first 2 weeks. So if I'm grading, I'm giving the D-line much higher marks than the O-line because the O-line has not protected Carter Stanley particularly well. They've forced Puka and Khalil and especially poor Dom Williams to just fight for their lives just to stay upright way too often. And there's no movement up there. I don't see any push from the O-line. So I don't know if it's a matter of finding, a way to stack one side and it just at least be good off that side. Put your 2 best guys on the left side and hope your center can hold it down and just do everything to the left. I mean, that's pretty predictable.
I think that's kind of what they have.
Right. That's true.
Their best linemen are on the left side, and they're rotating the guys on the right side.
I'm a genius then.
I don't know if they just have how often they're going to each side and how much more success they're doing on each side. But yeah, theoretically, that's what they have is their strong side is their left side, and the right side's up is a big question mark.
That's it. But they're not only going left. You're right, and you're talking about the balance there. Well, scrap the balance. Go to your strong side. Go to the side that works. Let the other side figure it out and come along. And if they do, then you can be balanced. But for now, those 4th down plays, they all went right. Mm-hmm. Everything.
Yeah, but in that 4th down where they call 2 timeouts, they're lined up on the left side, even though I think they're more on the left hash. In that 4th down where the Les calls 2 timeouts,
right?
They line up on the left side. I assume that's where they're trying to go is on the left side because that's where the receiver is. And instead, they finally flip it to the right and try to run a screen for Puka. So I bet that's what's going through their head.
Yeah. Good point.
There were a number of
pond water.
Big fan of that.
There were a number of questions kind of hitting on the fact that this is kind of looking like a rough year for KU football. But I wanted to get in this one. We had to get into Frank Saunders.
Frankie.
Before we get through this podcast.
Yeah.
So
he's earned it, man. He's been
absolutely.
there. He's been
there.
He's
only got one?
Yeah, I think he only came through with one. I think he saw all the replies and he's like, you know what?
They got this.
My people.
They got
through.
this.
Well, these situations, the 4th downs, the double icings, the adversity, it's a Les Miles approach building fortitude and leadership skills in the young men who will help lead a much more able-bodied roster in 2020 and beyond. Is this positive culture building? So, all these difficult things that they're experiencing right off the bat in week 2 against Coastal Carolina, and no doubt hearing about it, their friends, their buddies back home after the game, if they were watching, they're like, what was going on there? You guys called 2 timeouts, the 4th down. You guys lost to Coastal Carolina. Those conversations happen. So is going through all of this, is that ultimately, could it be a good thing for the guys that are going to be part of possibly a better team down the road? That was kind of an interesting way to look at it.
If that was the case, I feel like this thing would have been corrected a while back, right? They've had these type of moments where you're basically a meme on Twitter after games, and this ship hasn't been corrected in the last decade. So I have a hard time believing those moments right there are going to be the thing that changes the culture. Now, that doesn't mean the culture is not going to change. It's just I have a hard time believing that those 4th quarter moments right there and losing to someone like Coastal Carolina is a good thing. It's hard to spin that as a positive thing.
Yeah, and I don't think Frank thought it was a good thing either.
But he's just reaching. Yeah, he's just saying, hey, could this be it? And I think that's fair. I think at this point, the rest of the season is about what does this mean big picture? What does this mean long term? It doesn't mean,
Yeah,
are we going to win?
And do you adjust from these obvious mistakes because of going through them?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, right? You do have to see. I mean, a lot of times you have to see failure to learn how to get through it and improve it and things like that. Ideally, you don't. Ideally, you just line up and do it right. But ideally, you don't have a 10-year span like Kansas football has. And that's there's nothing ideal about what's been happening around here lately. So each coach, each person, each anybody would have their own beliefs about what it takes to flip a culture and to change things for the better long term. And I don't know if I mean, you could ask Les. I don't think he would articulate it very well because I think part of it's just what you think and what you do, and maybe it can't be put into words as easily. But I do think some of the early signs of this are about consistency and digging in and grinding and things like that. And if that's what this whole year is about, as long as they do it, as long as they show signs of that being something that can keep them above water, then that could be a benefit long term. But if I'm a Kansas fan or if I'm anybody listening, I'm looking at the rest of the season exactly that way. It's not about are they going to win this week. It's about what do they do this week that could help us in the future.
How much time we have left? Should we
like 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
So maybe 2 more questions, something like that.
I thought maybe we'll get in one more real one, and then I'll just kind of go rapid fire through some that don't even really require answers.
Good, yeah, perfect.
Okay. There were a number of questions just about like where this year seems like it's headed, and I thought one was kind of looking ahead, and we kind of referenced earlier the West Virginia game that's coming up in 2 weeks. That seems like maybe that's the last game that you could talk yourself into KU getting a win, right? So this was from
maybe
El Gigante. Is West Virginia bad enough that we could get to 2-10 this season? So West Virginia, in case you haven't been keeping up, they beat James Madison 20-13 in the opener, but then they lost 38-7 to Missouri in week 2.
Here's the only way. Here's the only reason, because it's in Lawrence.
It's in Lawrence. That's
the only
crucial component of this equation.
If it's anywhere else, no, and probably still no. I mean, right now we'll see. They could change my mind based on how they play against Boston College, but right now, I'm expecting West Virginia to come in here and win by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, like I when I saw this question, I was like, well, I want to look at kind of where West Virginia is compared to KU. So I went to ESPN's Football Power Index. West Virginia is 82nd. KU's 118th. Like, we knew KU is bad and KU has not looked good, but to me, I guess that's kind of in the same ballpark.
Yeah,
I mean, West Virginia is obviously worse than most of the teams that KU is going to play for the remainder of the season. ESPN had West Virginia 93rd overall in team efficiency, and KU is 123rd in that. So, I mean, it's looking like this is your last chance. If you're going to get a win this year to get to 2-10, you probably need to beat West Virginia. Maybe we're overreacting, but just based on what we've seen, that's all I can really talk myself into if I'm trying.
I can't wait till they beat Boston College and then they just taunt you in the postgame. What, Ben?
But in terms of betting spreads, I bet there's a chance that West Virginia is probably right around this Boston College line. I mean, they might be like 15 or 16, 17.
Man, that's a big line
favorites
for a road team. Road team. Wow. But you're right. It can't be single digits.
No, there's no way. Yeah. So it might be tough.
Yeah. No, if that's the question, is that the one? Is that the one you can look at? It has to be, because the rest are really good teams, and the rest are half of them are on the road. So yeah, we don't know. We don't know what Kansas football under Les Miles on the road looks like yet. Maybe they will surprise some people and compete in Boston. I don't think any of us are going to pick them, even against the spread. But I do think that maybe we'll see something that makes us go, didn't see that coming. And if you do, then that changes your approach and your opinion about maybe what that West Virginia game can and can't be.
And then just before we get out of here, I wanted to kind of run through some of the questions that I categorized as either sad and or funny. because they
This is where we need some sort of music playing
exactly.
behind. I'll work on that.
Brian Jimenez, why do I continue to care so much when it never changes? Gabriel Kastner, the only question I have is why I put myself through this bleep every year.
Did he write bleep?
Nope.
Oh, good for him.
Jason Giesman just replied with a Leslie Nope gif, and it said, everything hurts and I'm dying.
Ouch.
Yeah. Rock Chalk KU1, is it okay that I already don't care again? How many days until late night? So I thought you might be able to answer that. When's late night?
24 days or something.
Okay.
It's October 4th.
Okay, so it's coming up.
It's coming.
Says it like he doesn't know. He's got it down.
I saw it on Twitter the other day that somebody said 25 days, and I was counting on their math and subtracted 1. So it's right around there. 3 weeks. 3 weeks is 3 weeks from Friday, something like that.
Dave, will KU qualify for a bowl game again sometime before 2081?
So we're talking 62 years?
I mean, I feel like,
yeah.
one of those years.
I think
it's going to
so.
be their year.
I think so.
For sure. Yeah.
Strong
Probability.
Answers. Strong answers. And the final one.
From Jerry Jewell. Why is God punishing me?
Yes.
That might have been my favorite.
Yeah, that's a good one. Pond water still holds up.
It's good.
You did a nice job giving him the spotlight moment instead of just throwing it in there at the end. But good stuff. Love the questions. Don't love the football, but it is early, and they do have time to do better. We'll see if they do, but we'll be there every step of the way. Benton is heading to Boston.
That's right.
To watch that Friday night fight in Boston. The Eagles.
Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts.
Chestnut Hill, Doug Flutie's alma mater. Be there or be square. For Shane Jackson and Benton Smith, I'm Matt Tait. Thanks for checking out this week's KU Sports Hour. Enjoy whatever you want to enjoy the rest of the way. We'll talk to you guys again real soon.